There's a bad rule in Pathfinder, making it completely unplayable. Well, not really. It's kind of a little thing. But I created a thread on the Pathfinder 2E subreddit asking a question about a rule about how lines are measured on grids in Pathfinder 2E and kind of pointing out a problem with it and how I thought an alternative way tables should go about it. And there were some nasty comments there. Well, first of all, there was a lot of positive upvotes, but some nastiness in the comments. And I wanted to put out my position. I do have this soapbox. I have nearly 30,000 subscribers. Hopefully, I can reach that milestone soon. And I'll speak my piece. I speak my mind, and sometimes I am a minority, which is what happened when I posted a couple of years ago saying that hammers and flails in Pathfinder 2E have too strong of an effect when they crit by knocking enemies prone without a saving throw. And I'm showing that thread on the screen, and in my previous forum, Ronald SF 1977, I defended my position in the comments and got downvoted to oblivion, and lots of upvotes for the people disagreeing with me. But now it's an official change in the Pathfinder 2E remaster. I understand the hesitancy in the Pathfinder 2E subreddit to people who propose house ruling. And that's because there often is a hastiness for people coming from D&D 5th edition, I'm going to say it specifically, of not trusting the designers. But I think that GMs who study the system and understand its strengths should feel free that they can criticize some rules in the system. One, maybe it will lead to an improvement in the rules in the case of the hammer and flail critical specialization rule. But also, the game is ours, and that's said in one of the first pages of Pathfinder of the core rulebook. So let me get on to the issue. This came up because in my recent monk combat demonstration, there is a lightning bolt spell cast, and it affects creatures the way I remembered lines working in Pathfinder 1st edition. You could sometimes have squares that are adjacent to each other at a right angle relative to the caster, if that makes sense. I'm now highlighting what I call the thick line, as opposed to a thin line, which this would be. I think that's what's intuitive to people. Right here, the way I thought of it, the wizard would be able to cast Lightning Bolt and draw a line that goes through all three of these orcs. And although Foundry is not an authority, the engine makes clear that yes, a straight line drawn through them would go through those squares and affect all those orcs. However, that's not how it works in Pathfinder 2E, I discovered to my dismay. As you can see, we have what I call a thin line. Whenever you hop over to the next line over, it has to be a diagonal adjacency. Now, I think this poses a practical problem, because that means, in this case, it becomes impossible for anyone to affect all three of these orcs. No matter where the wizard stood, like let's say over here, it would just be impossible. It's this idea that everyone is locked into 5-foot squares and must cast spells from the center of their square outward. In my opinion, that breaks verisimilitude. And before grids became the norm in TTRPGs, Gary Gygax played his RPGs on his sand table, and many wargamers and also TTRPG players still do this today. They just use 3D figures and use measuring tape, or just a straight edge to determine what a line affects in the fiction. And to me, it makes perfect sense for the wizard to be able to aim from any part of his square. He doesn't have to aim from the center of his square outward. In fact, Pathfinder already allows for this to some extent when it comes to diagonal cones. The wizard could aim it like this or like this, because the first square of such a cone need only touch a corner of your space. So either of these cones would qualify. And I'm just not aware of, after 13 years of GMing Pathfinder 1st edition and 2nd edition, of any practical problems posed by doing the thick line, and it just makes more sense to me. But we have this diagram and some language in the rulebook itself that suggests this diagram is accurate. However, I think the jury's still out on that, personally. But I don't think it makes a good rule. In the end, the grid is supposed to serve the fiction and the fun of the game. Now, someone in the subreddit defended the diagram, the thin line, saying that what I was suggesting would lead to too many arguments at the table and haggling, to which I responded, I see what you're saying, but I think draw a line and see what it goes through is not hard, and for many is more intuitive. And they responded with something that I think made it sound overly complicated. They said, right up until someone thinks everything the line touches at all is fair, and someone else thinks if it's fair to say the caster can stick an arm way out to target, that the targets can squish into the corner of a square to not be targeted. And you're right back at the problem of it's unclear and unfair and actually not at all intuitive, plus actually requires a separate tool, I assume they mean a straight edge, to not be, I drew a line and it touched all of those targets. Source, trust me, bro. And then they say, especially as someone who voluntarily took on the moniker of rules lawyer, it seems strange that you're expressing a preference for wonky rules that can more readily be misinterpreted and misapplied over those that are actually clear, concise, and easier to use in practice. And this got a lot of upvotes. So you can see why I'm making this video. And I found out while shooting this video that the top commenter who disagreed with me in the previous thread about the hammer flail critical specialization rule is the same person. I think that it is bad to tell a player who is this wizard, no, you cannot lightning bolt those 3 orcs because we're on a grid. They would have a perfectly reasonable argument to say that they could shoot all 3 of those orcs. Honestly, I see more time being wasted in an argument with the player over what I think would be a fair point. And it's not up to saying, trust me, bro, when it's really clear how you would draw such a line. If you were to hold a straight edge over the grid, it would look just like this. Lines don't curve. Both rules have their own strengths and weaknesses. What's in the PF2 diagram has a rules consistency to it. It does match the path a creature would move. But in my games, I think the benefits of how I would run it outweigh the cons. So anyway, this was one of the quickest videos I've ever made. I felt a need to rant and put a position out there. Yes, I'm a stickler for rules, and that's precisely why I brought this up. I think there is room for respectful disagreement over whether a rule should be fixed or not, or whether we want to vary from the rules in our own games. Precisely because I'm a rules lawyer, I question the rule so that the rule can consistently be applied and create the end goal, which is fun, which is the highest law. And anyway, I just think there was some unneeded hostility because I dared to suggest that a rule in Pathfinder 2e could use some improvement. I mean, we got to the point of having a second edition because there were people who brought up complaints about first edition. I mean, are we going to stop improving our games? Anyway, that's my rant. Tell me if you agree or disagree that monsters should have the option of using the thick or the thin line. Again, it was not a big deal in the end, but I felt the need to say something about this, but also in general, it's a game, and sticking to a grid and not being mindful of how it affects players and the actual experience of play, I think that's rules lawyery in the pejorative sense. So that's it. I am Ronald, the rules lawyer. If you enjoyed my thoughts, like and subscribe. I have a few rants that I've actually planned coming up over the next couple of weeks. So ring the bell if you want to get notified about those. Also support my Patreon, and also we have a great Discord community where you can play Pathfinder 2e. We have a drop-in play system. Also on my Patreon you get 7-day early access to videos and access to exclusive content. So that's it. I have been the Rules Lawyer, and I'll see you next time.